Hello there, welcome to this third video on the 2019 Thematic Studies exam. Today we're looking at theme D, all about peace and conflict. We're going to have a look at what the mark scheme says. I'm going to show you some model answers and talk about some of the common misconceptions that came up with students who took this exam. Let's jump right in. So question number one, which of the following gives the meaning of pacifism? And we've got to take revenge, to gain power, to convert people to religion, or to be against violence. Now, all my students got this one correct. It is to be against violence, and you might know that word, to pacify, to calm something down. If you forgot what pacifism literally is, maybe by thinking about that word, you'd be able to work out what that meant. So well done to those who got that. Second question in theme D, give two ways that religious believers can work for peace. Now, I mentioned this in the last video, and I talk about this all the time. If you ever get a question about ways that a Christian can do something, or how could a Christian do this, you need to think about three things. How can a Christian spend their time? How can a Christian spend their money? And how could a Christian pray about this particular issue? So a model answer for this one, nice and easy. They could give their time by protesting against war, and they could pray that God would bring peace to the world. And if you can remember those three things, guys, time, money, prayer, generally you'll be able to work out a way of getting full marks for these ones. This is what the mark scheme officially says. So if you want to pause that and have a read, you are more than welcome. But I'm going to move on. So this one's got a red border, which can only mean one thing. This is a question that most of my students got wrong or didn't do very well in. Now, explain two similar religious beliefs about reconciliation. Now, if you've forgotten what reconciliation was, you could have been in a bit of hot water at this stage in the exam. And maybe you don't even know what it is today. But generally it means to come back together again after a conflict. That's what reconciliation is. So we're going to start looking at a model answer. So here's a belief from Christianity. One belief is that Christians should always work to reconcile after conflicts. That's a belief. Here's our development. In the Bible, Jesus taught, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. So we've got our point, and there's our development. Let's have another point. A similar belief is that all people need to be reconciled to God. And development there, Christians believe that Jesus came to die so our sin could be forgiven and we could be reconciled to God. So you've got two different beliefs there, similar about reconciliation, the conflict that humans might have with each other, and then the conflict that exists between humans and God because of sin, and then how Christianity teaches beliefs about those two in similar ways. Again, here is the official mark scheme for this question. If you want to pause the video, if you want to go through that with a fine tooth comb, get some detail down, that's absolutely fine. We are going to move on now. So on to question 4, which is our peace and conflict 5 marker. Similar as before, we're going to have a point with development, another point with development, and make sure we've got some Christian teaching in there to get that 5th extra mark. So let's dive in. Simple point. Jesus commanded Christians to love their neighbor. Development of that, your neighbor means everyone. So Christians should help victims of war. Let's get a second point. Second point, Jesus taught, treat others the way that you would like to be treated. And then a nice development on there. This would lead Christians to want to help victims of war because this is what they would do. This is what they would want someone to do for them. Really simple question. And look at the word in the question. Explain 2 reasons why religious people. Now, with these questions, you're generally going to go, how do they do it or why do they do it? Now, don't make the mistake on a question like this of writing about what they might do to help victims of war. That's not appropriate for this question. You've got to think about the motive behind it. And really nice, simple Bible quotes there. Love your neighbor and the golden rule, treat others the way you'd like to be treated, are applicable in many, many questions. So make sure you've got those in your arsenal. Okay, this is what the exam board officially says, and again, you can pause it here if you want to take any of that down and check your answers compared to those ones, but we are going to move on. And now on to our final peace and conflict question, the 12 marker. Religious believers should never fight in a war. And then there's our bullet points there to remind us how we're going to phrase this. Let's jump into a model answer. Okay, so remember we're looking for some Christians would agree and then why, some Christians would disagree and then why, and then a conclusion. We're also trying to bring in some logical chains of reason. That's when we make a point and we develop it all the way to a judgment, and we bring in Christian teaching throughout. So look out for these in this model answer. Here we go. Some Christians would agree. They may believe in pacifism and think that violence is never acceptable. They might argue that Jesus lived a peaceful life and did not respond violently when he was arrested and unjustly crucified, and that they should follow his example. Furthermore, Jesus taught that we should turn the other cheek and not fight back when attacked. If we apply this teaching to war, then religious believers should never fight in one. In World War II, the Quakers set up the Friends Ambulance Service and worked as medics to assist those who were harmed in fighting. Religious believers should follow this example and not fight, but volunteer to help in peaceful ways. Some Christians would disagree. They may say it's acceptable to fight in a war, in a just war, one that meets a set criteria that deems it justified. If the war is the last result, then it may be acceptable for them to fight, because other methods of diplomacy have failed. If the end goal is peace, it may be right for them to fight, because Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers." Many Christians believe in the lesser of two evils and would support fighting a war which stopped a bigger evil from prevailing. For example, the Nazis taking control of Europe and beyond in World War II. There are also many wars in the Bible in which God commands his people to fight. This shows that sometimes it is appropriate for a religious person to fight in a war. In conclusion, I believe that religious believers should understand why a war is being fought and have assurance that it is fought for the greater good before deciding to take part in the fighting. Now let's just take a moment on this answer. I'm going to grab a different color pen here and let's pull out a few things. So we need 2 points of view, right? So we've shown the examiner straight away that we've got 2 opposing views here, and both of them have been considered. What about Christian teaching? Now, with the Christian teaching, ideally you want to apply it throughout your answer and show that it's the anchor points of where your argument is going. So let's look for some Christian teaching. We've got the example of Jesus, specifically a moment when he was arrested and crucified. We've got Jesus' teaching to turn the other cheek. We've got the example of the Quakers, a religious group. Who else have we got here? We've got the just war criteria, and we've referenced that specifically. We've got last resort in here. We've got the end goal is peace. Blessed are the peacemakers. We've got the lesser of two evils. And we've got a reference to the Bible here that there are wars where God commanded his people to fight. So you can see just by looking at the colours there that those references to religion are applied throughout. Now we also need logical chains of reason. Let's look at one here. Let's grab a new colour. Let's go for purple. Okay, so we've got the idea of pacifism. We then move that on to explain it here. We've got explanation of pacifism. We've got the moving this on now into Jesus' life and suggesting that his peaceful ways was pacifistic. We also see that we move that on to a specific example from Jesus about his crucifixion. Now you can see here that a point has been taken and a logical chain of reason has been brought through. And this goes all the way through the question each time. We're not just making a point and then moving on quickly. We're building that into a logical chain of reason. And that's a really, really important skill to learn in RS if you want to access those high marks in your 12-mark questions. And remember, 12-mark questions is half the exam. So when we look at the exam board, we can see that in the mark scheme, that this question is basically pacifism versus just war theory. And that's the best way to attack this question or a question like that. And you should remember when you're going into a 12 marker in your thematic studies that it's very likely going to be about just war theory and pacifism or about nuclear weapons. And in both circumstances, knowing your arguments for pacifism and just war theory are crucial to scoring those high marks. So this is what the exam board has said for pacifism. This is what they've said for just war theory. Again, if you want to pause that and look at those for yourself, that's absolutely fine. However, that's all I'm going to talk about those today, but feel free to investigate that more for yourself. So that's the end of our summary of the thematic exams for theme D. Make sure you've checked out A, B and E as well. And if you've got any questions, feel free to type them in the comments section and I'll reply to them as soon as I can. Have a great day.